Alrighty, everyone, how's it going? Got November 25th, and we're going to get into it. So it's Sunday. I'm going to be talking about a few things. Not too much action this past week with Thanksgiving and the holidays and all. Not a lot of volume. And we're going to start by looking at the S&P 500. So we are very, very weak at this point. Very weak. We're about to test the October lows, which seems more probable than not, which is around 259.85, 260 for a whole number if you want to keep an eye on that. I would say the next major level, obviously, possibly this candlestick right here, which is 254.67. But the most important, in my opinion, is 252.92. This was the February lows of this year. If we go past that level, it's not good in my opinion. In my opinion, it would be longer term downside, and it's just not good. We can kind of negate this. This was getting oversold on the daily over here, bounced back, came down even further. We noted that bullish divergence a few times, and we saw that nice bounce. That could have been all the bounce for that bullish divergence. Then we could have kind of reset the daily RSI, cooled it off, and we could absolutely be pushing for more daily oversold since we had this bounce to cool everything off. Notice the RSI is not nearly as close to oversold as it was down here back in October for the October lows, right? So let's look at the weekly just to check it out. And we're looking at the weekly. So yeah, we're not weekly oversold by any means. We could, if we do break the February lows, we could start to see weekly oversold, but then we could get into the scenario where, similar in the daily time frame, how we had that bullish divergence, we could get oversold on the weekly, have like a really tiny move up, maybe even trade sideways for a couple weeks, and then continue down. And the RSI could be not as low, but the price action would have been lower than the previous dip. So just to reiterate on the daily, we see that with the RSI right here, right? So the RSI got extremely oversold. There's that low, but then we formed a lower low, and the RSI did not get as oversold. We could see a similar chart happen on the weekly time frame, and then we could see weekly bullish divergence. But in my opinion, we would be starting a long-term downtrend at that point, which, if we look at the longer-term chart for the S&P, we could absolutely see downside. We're pretty much at the all-time record highs. This is it right here, right? So we had that huge fear. We don't know what's going on, but look at where we are. We're at the peak. Absolutely could see a drop down to 215, 216. Not out of the question. We're at 263 right now. Potentially could have much more downside, but that's why I'm in and out really quick, and I'm protective in the short term. Now, a few things I want to look at, and one guy in my I guess we have like a small trading group from a few guys from high school, and one thing that someone pointed out was LABU. And I peeked at it. I was like, okay, I'm not really trading it. I'm not paying attention to it. It's not what my focus is on. My focus is on Canadian MJ. Now, there's a few things, right? So this is linked to the biotech bulls. So the biotech index is the XBI, which is the spider ETF for the biotech industry, right? The S&P 500 index for biotech. So that's pharmaceutical companies, I believe, mostly make up this sector. And this is this LABU is the leveraged ETF, right? So it's a 3 times leveraged ETF, and it's 3 times leveraged of XBI, right? So if you wanted to play bullish on XBI, I would go over to LABU, and it just magnifies your potential loss or gain by 3 times. So I peeked over to XBI, and I noticed, I was like, okay, we are seeing extreme bullish divergence, and I'm not looking for, a home run trade. I'm not looking for anything crazy, but let me look at let's see what I'm talking about here, right? So we start to have huge sell-off, gets very oversold on the daily, as noted by the RSI there. RSI gets to, let's see, 21, 29, 21. 21's the low there. Bounce up a little bit, continue downward, form a lower low, yet the RSI cools off. See, the RSI is not as oversold. It's at about 23. Bounce up, form, lower high, and onto another lower low, and the RSI isn't even oversold. It's at 31. So what's going on here? We have continuous lower lows. The price action continues to dip lower, yet the RSIs are getting higher. So if we could draw a line from the bottom of this RSI going up, it would be a positive slope. And if we could draw a trend line from it wouldn't be a straight trend line because the bottom of this low is right here, then right there, but it would be a negative slope, right? So that indicates to me RSI is cooling off, yet the price keeps on going lower. We're going to have a nice bounce soon. Not going to call it exactly, but I know one's coming, right? So conservatively, if I bought XBI, say, and me personally would be comfortable buying right here, and I'll explain why. Because at the very least, we would form a lower high, right? We've seen lower high, lower high. I would anticipate a lower high in the near future. But with all of this bullish divergence, who knows? We could bounce up to here. Not calling that. I'm only looking for right here. So let's call it 84. So 78, if I bought right now, it's 78, and it runs all the way up to 84. That's, almost 10%, a little shy of 10. But still, some people are happy to make 10% in a year. So even call it 5 or 6%, right? That's fine. So let's look at LABU, which is a 3 times leveraged ETF for the biotechs. So same thing. We see the same bullish divergence in the RSI, and all this is it magnifies the potential gain you can have. So like I said, lower high. So all I'm anticipating is a nice little bounce below this previous lower high, right? So worst case, that's all I'm looking for is just another lower high. So right here, let's call it 55 just for a whole number's sake. So the price is at 45.50 right now. Say I buy in tomorrow around 45.50 and I want to sell around 55. That's 20%. That's a huge trade. If I went in full stack, which I wouldn't because I don't follow this sector as closely as the Canadian sector, so I'd probably enter maybe a 10% position, which would still be a significant position to some people, and that could be a nice trade. I would take 20% any day. And knowing me, if once I got to 10%, 12%, I would probably start to lock in profits anyway, even though this is the 3 times leverage ETF. But so that's just something to note, something to look at that's interesting. It's gotten pretty beat up. So let's go to XBI again. As has everything, the S&P is obviously beat up. So there are several sectors that are beat up, and I'm going to talk about oil next. So on the weekly, we're actually approaching oversold. We're not there quite yet. I'm going to zoom in a bit. Let's see, we hit 31, and last week we closed at 32. Okay, so, zooming out to the weekly, I would really like to see the weekly go under 30. That hasn't happened yet, so that kind of is telling me to be very cautious with my entry. I don't want to just throw it in there and then have my game plan change to, the price went down, so I guess I'm holding, for the indefinite future. I don't like to do that. That's how I lose money. So a stop level where I would probably sell out, and it's not a deal because it's not very tight, but I would look at the low of this low, right? If we go past 73.97, that's a red flag. That is a red flag, and that's another reason why I'd be using a smaller position, because if I use a full position, I would actually take a pretty significant loss, even though I would protect myself from further loss, because if we do break this low, we're likely to set another lower low, and I would be down even more. So keeping a tight stop right at the low of this lower low right here, right there, that's where I'd be looking. So on the weekly, it looks like we could see more downside. I would really like to see this oversold, like high 20s. So if we zoom out, let's look at the last time that this sector was weekly oversold. Right in here. This area right here. Now, I'm not saying just because we're oversold, we're going to see a huge run-up like we did here, over 100%. But look what happened. We at least saw some follow-through. So that's all I'm looking for. I'm not really looking to nail the bottom. I'm just looking at these tools as indicators. So, last time we were at this level, around 30, we saw some more downside. There was, some significant downside, but then we bounced up. Just want to zoom out, see how far back it really goes. Okay, so check this out. And we're on the weekly time frame. So last time we were this oversold was in 2016, and then before that in 2008. That's significant. Only 3 times in the past 10 years. So, okay, enough about that. We're going to look on to oil. Now, there's a few ETFs for oil. USO is one of them. So, again, oil on the weekly time frame is getting oversold. At least for this ETF, right? So, USO is getting oversold. That's bad. It's getting really beat up. Zoom in a bit. Wow, what is this? Daily RSI 25. What do we get down to? Oh, it got down to 14. Jeez. So same type deal on the daily. I'm seeing bullish divergence because the price, these lows continue to go lower on the daily time frame. Oh wow, wow! Look at Fridays. Jeez, just gapped right down. I'm hoping we see a real nice bounce in oil. This looks juicy. I'm going to have to see if I can find any 3 times leverage ETFs for oil. I know, let's see, USO, OIL is another one. Same deal. It's not as... See, the volume is pretty garbage here, so I wouldn't be trading it just because of liquidity issues. But look how oversold it is. Same deal on the daily. It's... it got under 20 on the daily RSI. That's crazy. Looks like USO. Yeah, I would be looking for a bounce. So we've seen daily oversold before. We saw it back over here, back in 2017. Saw a nice bounce. It's like at around 10 to 11. Okay, 10%. Then cooled off, got oversold again. And we probably saw another, was that 10%? 950, 1060. Yeah, another 10% bounce. Then we got oversold again. That was the final bounce. And then we obviously saw a nice run up after that. So I'm going to be looking for bounces. These aren't, I'm not looking to jump in long term to any oil companies. I'm just taking note of other sectors that are oversold and presenting opportunities for bounces, which these are all looking really nice. So USO. Okay, back to SPY. So yeah, SPY, I'm concerned about the S&P. I think we're going to test this level of October lows. And then if that breaks, chances just increase that we're going to test the February lows. So if you're in, any S&P heavily weighted company, Apple, I can't remember if it's like a 3 or 5% of the S&P. Apple's getting crushed. Absolutely crushed. Let's look at the weekly. Oh, almost oversold on the weekly. Let's see, what was the RSI there? 31. Almost under 30. But then again, look at this. It could be a good long-term buying opportunity. I don't like to say that because the S&P was at all record highs, and it looks like a scary chart. We would need a few years of consolidation. Could be healthy. So if we look at every time Apple got oversold, even if it touched 30, like around here, it touched 30, it just bottomed out and then continued upward. This, we could see several more months of sideways action, choppy action, even more downside. But in a company like Apple, this, it could be a buying opportunity. If you are a long-term trader, that might be something to consider. But me, I'm just looking in the short term, and yeah, that's it. That's what's worked for me. So hopefully that's what works for you. Let's look at Amazon. Again, we're on the weekly. Oh, if my computer will load. Come on. Alright, we're going back to Apple. Okay, we're on Amazon. So Amazon, obviously, crazy company of the century, blah, blah, blah. I mean, look at this chart. This is just ridiculous. It's unsustainable. So, very nice correction. Same thing as Apple. Could be a buying opportunity. It's not my forte. I'm not following Apple closely, watching their earnings, every earnings call. Obviously, the weekly RSI is getting cooled off. We're not near oversold yet. But, yeah, so we're not near oversold yet on the weekly. It's not an immediate buy looking for the bounce type of deal. Daily downtrend. Would expect and anticipate a lower high to form here. Yeah, I mean, RSI is low. It's been low for a few weeks. So, I don't see anything that tells me the trend's about to change. We're in a daily downtrend. Same thing with Apple. Apple's in a daily downtrend. I would need to see the trend change. Need to start to see higher highs and higher lows. Right now, it is just lower highs, lower lows. So if this keeps up, these companies impact the S&P. So that's why I'm kind of bearish on the S&P. I don't see too much hope. Yet, I'm not in these companies. So, full disclaimer, I'm not a financial advisor, so do your own due diligence. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking at. Definitely going to be looking into LABU for a potential bounce opportunity. Hope to see that come soon. So it's at, 45 now? Yeah, even if we got to 53, I'd probably be selling at 53, probably even at 50, to be honest. But that's interesting. Okay, that's all. I will see you guys tomorrow.